Hello everyone and welcome back to the UK Koi channel. I hope you're doing well, and in today's video we're going to be asking quite an important question, and that is how to care and grow koi fish fast in an aquarium. Now, one thing I want to make clear right from the start is that I do not recommend you keep any koi other than koi fry in an aquarium. Now, this is also due to the fact that I don't feel any tank is really adequate for a koi, apart from rare occasions where you have like a 200-300 gallon tank, and even then, in my eyes, koi are pond fish and therefore should be kept in a pond. And if you're looking to grow them fast, koi fry are the only option, as they're the only koi that will grow fast in a tank of around 50 gallons. And this is simply due to their smaller size. With this in mind, I do hope you enjoy the video, and if you do enjoy the video, please do consider subscribing, as I would really appreciate it. Anyway, let's get on with the video. Now, I've broken it down to 4 key steps with some tips at the end for some little secrets. These 4 steps are filtration, heating, aeration and diet. Now, the first and arguably most important step is step 1, filtration. Now, I recommend you always use an external filter. I really am not a fan of hang on the backs, as they're really not adequate for koi. You always want to use a large canister filter like this one here. I have this Aquarium, really good, does plenty of water circulation throughout the day. As you can see, the flow rate is really high and it really handles the koi well. I've had no issues at all. I clean it about every 2 to 3 weeks and I've had absolutely no issues. And like I said, I really don't recommend use hang on the backs, as no hang on the back filter is really of an adequate size to manage sort of the waste that koi fish produce. And also, on the topic of cleaning filters, one thing you have to take into consideration when keeping koi in an aquarium is you have to clean them a lot more than you do in the pond. This means you have to do much more frequent water changes and filter cleans, and I do about a water change once or twice a week and clean the filters every 2, maybe 3 weeks at a push. And this means you need some higher maintenance on the tank to keep the nitrates and the ammonia low. This is all to do with the smaller size of the tank. As I said, ponds are much better for koi. However, when it comes to going on koi fry, you can't really go wrong with the tank. All you have to take into consideration is you have to be cleaning them a lot more than you would in a pond. But other than that, the fry should do perfectly well in the tank, as long as your filter is adequate to handle the waste that the koi produce, as koi will produce far more waste than your average aquarium fish. You should really have no issues with ammonia or nitrate. Now we go to step 2, which is heating. Now, heating is quite simple. You can use any aquarium heater that works on any tank. Of course, get one that is adequate wattage for the size of your tank, but other than that, any aquarium heater will do. Now, I always recommend you keep them at 24 degrees. And the reason for this is at 24 degrees, the fish's metabolisms are at the highest possible rate. What this means is their body is consuming the highest possible amount of nutrients and transferring it into energy as it possibly can. What this then means is the koi are growing at their highest peak rate. So when you keep them at around 24 degrees, you're going to be having them growing as quickly as possible. However, I do not recommend you keep them above 24 degrees Celsius, as this actually could be a waste of power and can also damage the fish. Now it's time for step 3, which is aeration. Now, I use this external aerator here, as you can see. This is just one from my local pet shop and I have absolutely no issues with it. As you can see, it produces plenty of oxygen for the fish and it has a really high flow rate in terms of the bubbles that come through it. Now, aeration is very key when growing koi, as they need oxygen to survive and you need to avoid oxygen crashes. If oxygen is too low, then your koi are not going to grow fast at all. Fish, like all animals, need oxygen to produce energy, so if there's not enough oxygen, they cannot produce energy and grow. And if it looks like your fish are piping and breathing at the surface, that's usually a sign that they're actually low on oxygen, so I always recommend you get an aerator if you're seeing that. Now let's move on to the next step, which is diet, which is arguably quite an important step. Now, all you have to feed them really is what you'd feed them in a normal diet. Now, I feed them koi food. This is a pellet here that I have from Cotterbrook Koi Farm, and this pellet is very adequate for these koi. There's really no variation in what you feed them. It's exactly what you'd feed them in a pond. However, you want to be a lot more careful about how much you feed them, because overfeeding can be a lot more disastrous if you have them in an aquarium versus a pond. Overfeeding the pond isn't usually too bad, as it takes a lot longer for the ammonia to build up from excessive food being in the water. However, in an aquarium, overfeeding can have its effects very quickly, as ammonia spikes can happen almost instantly, and that can really damage the fish. Alternatively, you can also use brine shrimp, bloodworms. I do feed these guys some frozen bloodworms from time to time. You do want to vary the diet. You can also feed them oranges, watermelon, any kind of fruit. These koi will eat plenty much anything. Just make sure you're keeping them on a varied diet, but also keeping them on a base of a sort of a fry crumb, just to provide them with the proteins they need. I do not recommend you grind up adult koi food, as the protein levels are quite low in that. Whereas the koi fry food has a much higher protein levels, which these fry need as they're sort of building up their bodies. They're going to need high levels of protein to produce the muscles and other parts of their body. So I always recommend you get fry food rather than grinding up koi food, as that's really not adequate in terms of nutrients. And it's really just about feeding them a varied diet. Now I recommend you feed them about 3, maybe 4 times a day, and don't give them any more than they can eat about 2 or 3 minutes. Anything more than that could have some real issues. And also do keep in mind that the koi will always look hungry when the water's this warm, but don't continue to feed them. Fish tend to not have a way of telling themselves that they're full, so you can overfeed them quite easily. Now I've also got 2 little tips regarding stocking and plants. These are sort of what I've learned over the years, so I hope this helps. Now first, with stocking, I always recommend you understock, and just if you're having a bit of questions about how many to put in, always put in less than you think you should. It's a really big issue that some people put too many fish in, and then they have really big issues with their filter crashing, the koi look really unhealthy, and it's also just not great for the aquarium. So I always recommend you put in a lot less, and if it looks like it's fine, add a few more in. Always having more is a good thing, as it makes the fish more confident, they're more likely to feed, but at the same time, having too many fish in the aquarium can have a lot more disastrous effects. I also recommend if you have one fish that's a much more confident feeder than the others, that you always add that one in, as it's more likely to get them to feed. But in terms of stocking, I really wouldn't put any more than 10, maybe 12 in a 50-gallon tank. You don't want to risk it too much. If they are like 2-3 week old fry, you can put a few hundred in, but once they get to about an inch in length, you don't want to be going over about 20, as depending on your filter, it can really damage the ammonia and nitrate in the tank. Now, in terms of plants, it's really a guessing game. Now, I don't recommend you put any plants in unless they're already established. Now, these plants have already been rooted in and have been growing for quite a while. I've got Anubias there and then this nice reed. Now, these have already been growing in for months, so their roots were firmly planted and the koi couldn't rip them out. But even then, it's really important that you make sure that you always have sustained plants. If you add in a new plant, chances are the koi is just going to rip out the roots, rip out the plant, and it's going to be killed instantly. So if you haven't already got plants in the tank, I really do not recommend you add plants, as koi will just rip them to pieces. Just be a waste of money, really. Koi are sort of bottom feeders, and if there is a new plant added, they'll pick away at it every single day. They'll rip up the roots, and as you can see here with my Anubias, they've already started to sort of peck at the reeds. As you can see here, these leaves here have had some ripping at them, some tearing at them, and that's caused them to start to die. So that's one thing to take into consideration, is that unless the plants are established, I really wouldn't recommend adding them into the tank. And yeah, if you follow these steps, you should have no issues at all. Now, I would recommend you only keep koi with koi. As you can see here, I've got quite a mixture, but that's just given my circumstances. I've had no issues here, but I really wouldn't recommend you mixed angelfish with koi like I am here. It's really not a good idea. I've had no issues, but I really wouldn't recommend you do that. But if you follow these steps, I think you should have some good success. Now, just to summarise, I recommend you don't use a tank smaller than 50 gallons, unless they are really small fry, and it's only for a short time period. But other than that, if you follow these steps, you should have some pretty good success. Let me know down below if this helped you, and any new video ideas you might have. Anyway, I'll catch you guys in the next one.